In the first film, blind veteran actor Stephen Lang, aka Norman, was a beast when three robbers abruptly broke into his house in an almost abandoned section of Detroit. Here's what went down in the sequel, along with the best ways to take out someone like Norman. So, what exactly is Don't Breathe 2 about, and what goes down? The film begins 8 years after the events of the first film. Norman Nordstrom, the blind main character, lives in the decaying suburbs of Detroit with his 11-year-old daughter, Phoenix, and his pet Rottweiler, Shadow. Norman explains to Phoenix at an early age that he used to have another house, which burned down in a fire and killed her mother. Hernandez, Norman's friend and former Army Ranger, brings him groceries once a week. Hernandez, Norman's only social connection, persuades a hesitant Norman to let her take Phoenix with her to run errands in the town, so she can get out of the house, which never happened. Hernandez stops at a gas station to refuel while running errands with Norman's daughter. Phoenix is then seen getting out to use the bathroom. She is subsequently ambushed in the bathroom of a gas station by a gang member. Shadow, on the other hand, scares the man away and orders the gang to follow Phoenix back home. However, shortly after their encounter, Hernandez is ambushed and killed by the gang after dropping off Phoenix. The men then proceed to Norman's house, desperate to get to the little girl. Shadow is also kidnapped and murdered by the gang. Norman goes outside to look for Shadow because his food bowl is still full, while the gang quietly breaks into the house to kidnap Phoenix. Norman quickly discovers Shadow dead from a gunshot wound. When he realizes Shadow has been shot, he returns to the house to defend it. Once he returns, a fight breaks out between Norman and the gang members. Raylan, the gang leader, eventually shows up and tells Phoenix, who is hiding with Norman, that he is in fact her real father, confirming this shocking statement by showing they both have a streak of white hair on the right side of their heads. It is then creepily revealed that Phoenix's house burned down 8 years ago after a meth lab in the basement exploded. Phoenix's father was arrested immediately following the explosion and sentenced to 8 years in prison for a variety of crimes. While examining the burned house with Shadow, Norman randomly discovered Phoenix unconscious and took her to his home to fulfill his desire to have a daughter again. After seeing her leave flowers for her mother's memorial at the burned house, her father realized Phoenix was still alive. Phoenix, who is conflicted, tries to flee but is knocked unconscious by Rawl, another gang member. Meanwhile, Phoenix's father unleashes his dog on Norman, who is hesitant to kill it and instead decides to trap it in the attic. The gang decides to burn down the house before fleeing with Phoenix in tow. Norman, unbeknownst to them, releases the dog from the attic, and they both escape the burning house. Outside, Norman discovers Hernandez's van and equips himself with several weapons before leashing the dog and leading it to the gang's hideout. Phoenix's father reveals her real name is Tara at the gang's headquarters, and she is introduced to her mother, who was alive but extremely ill, terminal. Tara's mother explains that she made a mistake while cooking a batch of meth 8 years ago, which resulted in the explosion. The chemicals released by the fire ravaged her internal organs, leading to her current state. It is then revealed that the gang abducted Tara, not to get their daughter back, rather so a criminal surgeon can extract her heart and transplant it into her mother, as Tara is her only relative. Tara is drugged and taken to his Spartan operating room, where the surgeon explains that due to a lack of proper equipment, he will have to remove Tara's heart while she is fully conscious. A power outage prevents the surgeon from extracting the heart. Raylan then dispatches Rawl and the rest of his gang to investigate the basement, where they are ambushed and slaughtered by Norman one by one. Rawl, as the last man standing, decides he does not want to be a part of Tara's murder and joins Norman, pointing him to where she is. Norman ambushes the group, first killing the surgeon. A fight breaks out between him and Raylan, and the father accidentally shoots Tara's mother, killing her. Norman then gouges out the father's eyes and abandons him for dead. Norman, who is crying and severely injured, tells Tara that everything her father said was true. He confesses to his crimes, including murder and rape, and tells her to flee. Raylan, who had survived the fight, ambushes Norman and stabs him in the stomach. Tara kills him with a knife before he can finish him off. Tara tries to assist Norman and tells him she can save him, to which he responds, "You already have," before dying. Tara leaves the hotel and heads to the shelter she saw at the start of the movie, when she sees children playing. She introduces herself as Phoenix. So, how can you beat Norman? Well, to start off, there are a few things you can do. First, you must use his weakness against him. Although the man is a veteran, he is also blind, which does hinder his ability abilities quite a lot. Before encountering this man, make sure you can use a weapon like a gun. You can sneak up and hit him at quite a range, rather than getting up close and experiencing the wrath of his hand-eye coordination. Next up, you have to be critically thinking at times. Norman is always one step ahead and has a lot of things in place to make up for his lack of vision. He's always on alert and never fears any incoming situation. You must not act spontaneously. Rather, think about every possible encounter you could have with the blind man and prepare for them all. Now, this next tip plays in with the first. Use his weaknesses to your advantage. Instead of running around the house trying to take Norman out, stay in the basement. Stay in the dark where he is less likely to be able to catch you. Stay still and wait for him to approach you. This is your best shot at overpowering him and catching him off guard. And finally, to beat Norman, ensure that you have a proper getaway ready. Have multiple exits and someone who is always on watch. We've seen from the previous movie that Norman doesn't give up once you leave his property. Finally, Don't Breathe gave us plenty of reasons to root for Norman. First off, he is a veteran who only lost his sight due to fighting for his country in the Gulf War. To make things even worse, his daughter was killed in a tragic car accident, and he was wronged by the justice system by allowing her killer to walk free. However, by the end of the film, we had plenty of reasons to feel bad about cheering for him. He seemed to take sadistic pleasure in hunting the kidnappers, and he was a rapist, despite his protests to the contrary. Don't Breathe 2 appears to go in the opposite direction. At the start of the film, he's not only carrying all the baggage from the first film, which has the audience decidedly on his side, but Norman has also abducted a young girl, raised her on lies, and is treating her like a caged bird. However, by the end of the film, he has made some progress towards redeeming herself by serving as her protector and repeatedly sacrificing himself to keep her evil parents at bay. The way you feel about Norman at the end of Don't Breathe 2 will influence whether you like or dislike the ending. Another important factor will be how you interpret his final words. Norman and Phoenix share a moment when it appears that the threat has subsided and Raylan has died. He's bruised, but the old man appears to be alive. At that point, he begs her to leave him, saying, "I've done it. I've raped," which is undoubtedly open to interpretation. A skeptical interpretation of the "I've raped" line could be that director Rodo Seyaguse needed Norman to say that so that the audience would turn against the blind man, pleasing them when he is apparently mortally stabbed seconds later. A less skeptic interpretation is that Norman screams, "I've raped," to demonstrate character development in his final moments. In the original Don't Breathe, he went out of his way to assure Rocky that he is not a rapist, but rather someone who made a deal with his captive. And there you have it. Everything you need to know about how to overtake Norman, the freaky blind man from Don't Breathe 2. Make sure to let us know your thoughts down below. How would you take him out? What's your best tactic? And always, thanks for watching.